Hi folks, so today what we're going to be doing is estimating the answers to calculations by rounding amounts of money. Okay, so before we get on to that, we're going to do just two starters today. So have a wee look at these. If you think you can do them without any bother, then just pause the video and get on with it. Otherwise, stick around. So first one, find the change from £20 if you spend those three different amounts there. So if we want to work out the change from £20 when we've spent those, then we need to know what our total is. So it would make sense to add these three amounts up. So we're going to do £2.19, £3.56 and £10.98. We're going to add all those up. So we've been practicing this week anyway, haven't we? Adding and subtracting different amounts of money. And let's just notice here that when I've written these amounts down, I've put my decimal points all in a line and fitted the numbers around them. Okay, so adding up from the right hand side, 9 and 6 is 15, add 8 makes 23. Then we've got 1 and 5 is 6, add 9 makes 15, add 2 is 17. Then 2 add 3 is 5, add 1 is 6. And then 1 is all we've got in that column. So our three amounts total £16.73. So now we're going to do a subtraction from £20 and we're going to work out what change we would get. So in this first question here, we're using the things that we were practicing on Monday. Okay, so remember, when we're subtracting, we start at the right hand side, we're going to do 0 take away 3, but we can't do that. We can't take away 3 if we don't have any. So we need to go to our next door neighbour, but they haven't got any either. So they need to nip to their next door neighbour and borrow, but they haven't got any either. So they need to go borrow from here. But remember, you can only borrow from your next door neighbour. This one can't lend to me over here. It's got to go through all the houses in between first. Okay, so this one here is where we can borrow from. So that makes that one 10. Now this person's got enough that they can lend your next door neighbour one, and then they've got enough that they can lend us one. Okay, so we've got 10 take away 3 is 7, 9 take away 7 is 2, 9 take away 6 is 3, and 1 take away 1 is nothing. We don't need to put the 0 in there, and so our answer is £3.27. Now, of course, there are other ways that we could have found that answer of £3.27. We could have counted on from £16.73. We could have counted on up to £20, and that would have also given us the £3.27. Okay? And the next question, find 2/3 of 591 kilograms. Again, if you know what you're doing, just pause it. If you don't know what you're doing, then remember you divide by the number that's on the bottom of a fraction, by the denominator, and you multiply by the top. So we're going to do 591 divided by 3 and then times 2. Okay, now think about 591, think about what we looked at yesterday. We can check before we start whether this number is a multiple of 3 and whether we're going to get an exact answer when we divide by 3. If we add up these digits, 5 and 9 and 1, we get 15, and that is in the 3 times table, so we know that our answer is going to be exact. Okay, so we're going to do 591 divided by 3 to start with. So 3 into 5 goes once, with a 2 left over. 3 into 29 goes 9 times, because that's 27, with 2 left over. And then 3 into 21 goes 7 times. So 1/3 of 591 is 197. So now we need to take this 197 and times it by 2. We can either do this as a multiply, or we could just add 197 and 197. Anyway, 7 2s are 14, 9 2s are 18, add the 1 makes 19, 1 2 is 2, add the 1 makes 3. So our answer there is 394 kilograms. Okay, always check back with your question, make sure you've put your units in if you need to. Okay, so getting on with today's lesson then. We're going to think about money, and sometimes money calculations can get a bit complicated. So I want us to picture the scene here that I've written out here. So you're shopping and you've got £30. You want to buy items that cost £4.22, £7.95, £8.53 and £13.47. What would be a quick way to work out if you've got enough money? Okay, so that's what I want us to think about. I know that a lot of you are probably thinking, well, I'll get my phone out and use the calculator, but let's not use the calculator. Let's use our brains and work this out. So I want us to have a think about that. We're actually not going to answer this question just now. We're going to keep this question in our minds and we're going to look at the rest of the lesson, and then we're going to come back to this question and see if we can find a good way of answering that. Okay, so what I want to look at just now is estimating, okay? And an estimate is a rough calculation, it's not a guess. If I ask you to estimate the answer to a question, I'm not asking you to guess the answer. What I'm asking you to do is make the numbers that you're dealing with a little bit easier so that you can do a much simpler calculation to get a rough answer. Okay, so it's not just a guess. An estimate is not a guess. It's a calculation based on simpler numbers than you were started with. Okay, so for example, when we're rounding money, it might help us if we round money to the nearest pound, or if we round it to the nearest 10 pence, or it might be to the nearest £10 or £100 or £1,000. Okay, we just need to do what is sensible for the question. Sometimes we're told exactly how to do it, but in real life, you're not told exactly how to do it. You need to work out what's sensible. Okay, so we can round amounts so that our calculations become easier. Right, I just want to do a quick recap of rounding before we go on to looking at rounding money. Okay, so for example, if we started off with 348 and we had to round that to the nearest 10, then what we're needing to do is look at our tens digit, so that's the 4, and that will either stay as a 4 or it'll move up to a 5, and it's the 8 that tells us what to do with it. Okay, so remember when you're rounding, if you work out which number it is that you're rounding and then you look at the one following it, and if the one following it is a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3 or a 4, you round down, and that means you leave the number as it is. And if it's a 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, you round up, which means you move it to the next number along. Okay, so because the 8 is in this set of numbers here, it means that we're going to round the 4 up to the 5. Okay, so what we've got there in that case is we'd have 3, 5. But that doesn't look right, does it? Because 35 is not an approximation for 348. If I owed you £348, it wouldn't be okay for me to give you £35, would it? So what we've got to do is make sure that the numbers that we've got here, the 3 and the 5, mean what we want them to, okay? That still has to be 300. So in order for that number still to be 300, that means we have to put a 0 here. And I'll make that look like a 0 and not a 6. Oops. Okay, so when we're rounding, we look at the next one along. So for example, if we had 456, let's make that 2,456, and we wanted to round that to the nearest 100, let's say this time. So if we're rounding to the nearest 100, we need to pick out the hundreds digit. Sometimes it's easier to say the number out loud. So 2,456, so it's 400. So that's the hundreds digit. Okay, so if we're rounding to the nearest 100, then we look at the 5. The 6 has got nothing to do with our rounding. We look at the 5, and because the 5 is in this list, like the 8 was before, then we round up. So that means that this 4 here changes to a 5. Okay, so we get 2, 5. Now, again, 25 is not an approximation for 2,456. This 2 here has to mean the same as that 2 there. So what we need is zeros in here to keep that 2 meaning 2,000. Okay, so 2,500 is an approximation for 2,456. Okay, we're going to do one more, and that's going to be 63,839. And we're going to round this number to the nearest 100 again. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at our number. We can say it out loud if it helps. 63,839. So the 100 digit is the 8. So we're going to look, we're either going to leave that 8 as it is, or we're going to change it to a 9. And it's the 3 that tells us. So we have a look over here, and we see which column the 3 is in, and it's in this one. So that means we round down. In other words, we leave that number as an 8. Okay, so what we've got here is 638. But remember, that was 63,000. For this still to mean 63,000, we've got to fill in those zeros there. Okay, so we're going to go on now and look at rounding amounts of money. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to give you some amounts of money. We're going to round each amount to the nearest 10 pence, and then we're going to find the total. Okay, so the amounts of money that we're starting with are 43 pence, 88 pence, and 21 pence. Okay, so we're going to round each of these to the nearest 10 pence. So when we're rounding to the nearest 10 pence, using the techniques that we were just looking at, 43 pence, remember it's the 4, that's the 10p digit, isn't it? We're rounding to the nearest 10. So the 4 stays as a 4 because the 3 tells us to leave it. So the 43 pence, we're going to round to 40 pence. We're going to do the same sort of thing with the 88 pence. That's the 10s. So the 8 tells us we need to move that 8 here up to a 9. So that's going to give us 90 pence. And the last one, again, this is the 10s digit, and the closest 10p to 21p is 20p. And it's quite a lot easier for us to add up 40p, 90p and 20p than it is to add up 43, 88 and 21. So when we add up these amounts, we don't even need to be adding up the right hand side and adding up the left hand side and doing it in a formal way. We can do this in our heads. So for often when we're adding, it's easier to start with the biggest number. So let's start with the 90, and 90, we'll add the next one, add 40. So 9 add 4 is 13. So 90 add 40 is 130. And then add these makes 150. Okay. But does that make sense to say that as an answer? The answer is 150p. That's not really what we would say, is it at all? Remember, there's 100 pence in a pound, so we would call that £1.50. Okay, what we don't do is stick the p on the end as well. We don't need that. Okay, if we're writing our answer in pence, it's 150 pence. If we're writing it in pounds, it's £1.50. Oops, I've rubbed too much out there, sorry. Okay, so £1.50 is our estimate to adding up these three numbers here. Okay, so we're going to do that again, but with our amounts written in pounds. So this time they were written in pence here. We had amounts of pence. Next time we're going to round them to the nearest 10 pence, but we're going to write it in pounds. You'll see what I mean in a second. So we're going to start with £1.18, 63 pence, and £2.91. Okay, actually I'm going to change it to £2.97. Okay, so we're going to round them first to the nearest 10 pence, and then we're going to add them up. Okay, so rounding £1.18 to the nearest 10 pence, Well, the digit in £1.18 that represents the 10 pences is that one, isn't it? So the 8 tells us to move that one up to a 2. So that 10 pence that £1.18 is closest to is £1.20. Okay, when we're looking at this second one, 63p, the 6 is the 10 pence digit. So that means that the 3 tells us to leave the 6 as it is. So we've got, oops, never mind the matter, 60 pence there. And with the last one, the 9 is the 10 pence digit, isn't it? But the 7 tells us to move that 9 up one. So we can't move 9 up one. We've got to go across the decimal point there. If you think about it, if you were counting out 10 pences, you'd be having, from £2, you'd have £2.10, £2.20, £2.30, £2.40, £2.50 and so on. Then you get to £2.90, and after £2.90 it will be £3. So that's what we round this one to. So altogether, when we add these up, we've got £1.20, 60 pence and £3. So let's start with the biggest one again. So £3, add the next biggest one, add £1.20, so that gives us £4.20, and add 60p, so £4.20, add 60p is £4.80. So that gives us an estimate without having to add up these 3 exact numbers that we started with. So if we were spending this amount, this would roughly be our total. It wouldn't be exact, but it'd be roughly that. Okay, so we're going to do the same sort of thing now, where we're rounding to the nearest pound. Okay, so let's start with £6.38 and £12.53. Okay, so we're just going to have 2 numbers to start with this time. So we're going to round these to the nearest pound. Okay, so our pounds digit is the one straight in front of the decimal point. So it's this one and it's this one. Okay, so we're going to look at our first number here and we're going to say, does the 6 stay as a 6 or does it move up to a 7? And the 3 tells us that we leave it as a 6. So remember, when rounding to the nearest pound, that means our answers have to be in pounds, okay? Whole pounds. So when we round £6.38 to the nearest pound, that's going to give us £6. Okay, and the £12.53, when we round that to the nearest pound, remember we're looking at the 2, and it's the 5 that tells us whether we leave the 2 as it is or we move it up to a 3. And because 5 was in the right hand list there, we move the 2 up to a 3, giving us £13. £6 and £13 is £19. Okay, then we're going to have a look at now rounding each amount to the nearest £100 to find the total. Because sometimes if you're spending large amounts of money, for example, if you were doing a room up in your house or doing your house up or doing something really big in the garden, you'd be spending hundreds of pounds and amounts of hundreds of pounds. So in that case, we'd want to be, we don't need to round to the nearest pound because we don't need that amount of accuracy. So let's have a look and see what we can do with this. So for example, if we were doing up the house or garden and we were spending £1,563.25 and £287.13 and £402.08. So these are the totals that we're going to have to spend, but let's not work them out exactly. Let's work them out to the nearest £100. Okay, so then we'll be able to find our total. So this one, we need to have a look here at this number and see which is the hundreds digit, £100. Okay, so remember the £100. So this column is pounds, that's £10. That's £100, okay? So our hundreds digit is that one. So the 6 tells us we need to move that up one, okay? So instead of the 5, we've now got a 6. but this was 1,000 and something. It still needs to mean 1,000 and something. Oops, I just put a decimal point there by accident. And so to keep it meaning 1,000 and something, we need to put those zeros in. Okay, so the next one, looking at the hundreds digit, it's this one. Say it out loud if it helps. £287.13, £287.13. So the 8 tells you need to round the 2 up one. So that's becoming a 3. So that'll be £300. And then the £402 and 8 pence, that's probably the easiest one there. We can see without even doing any particularly fancy rounding that the amount of £100 that's nearest to £402 and 8 pence is going to be £400. Okay, so let's see if we can do this one in our heads as well. Again, start with the biggest one, 1,600. Now look, we've got quite a nice easy addition to do here, because 400 and 600 make 1,000, don't they? So altogether, we've got 2,000 if we add that one, and then another 300. So that's £2,300 altogether. So spending these amounts here is roughly going to come to 2,300. And we can see that if we're having to do, if we're having to spend that kind of money, if we're spending these amounts, the pences or even the pounds they're not so relevant. We need to get an idea about what the total is going to be. So this is our estimate of the total. And of course, for anything that we've been working out in this lesson, we can go back, and if you want to, you can precisely add up the amounts that we started with, and you can see how close your estimate is. Okay, that's a job that you can do if you want to do that. Okay, so moving on again. Oops. So find an estimate for the following calculations by rounding appropriately. So this time you're going to have to choose what way to round. Okay, so for example, we're going to do £3.95 times 5. So we're multiplying that. We've been adding and subtracting before, but I want us to think about multiplying and dividing as well. So if we had to buy 5 items at £3.95, rather than working out £3.95 times 5, what would be an appropriate rounding to do here? What would be an appropriate amount to estimate with rather than £3.95? Well, £3.95 is so close to £4, isn't it, that £4 would be a good estimate. And 4 times 5, £4 times 5, we know is £20. So our estimate here would be, our estimate for £3.95 times 5 would be £20. Okay, so just one more, I think. If we were spending £73,829 and £42,163, if we were spending that amount, now let's not add it up carefully, let's find an estimate. So I think what we'll do here is we'll round this. We'll get a really approximate figure, but I think we can round this to the nearest £10,000. Okay, so the nearest £10,000, remember? So we've got pounds, £10, £100, £1,000, 10,000. So we're going to round with this first digit. Okay, so rounding with the first digit, the 3 tells us to leave the 7 as it is. Okay, so our approximation for 73,829 is going to be, we're going to leave the 7 as it is. It's got to mean 70,000 though, so we need all those zeros in. And then the next one, 42,163. Again, we're rounding down, so that's going to tell us 2 leaves the 4 as it is, so we get £40,000. So if we've got 70,000 and 40,000, well, let's just think adding up 70 and 40, or adding up 7 and 4. 7 and 4 makes 11. So 70 and 40 is 110. So we've got £110,000. Okay, so that would be our estimate for adding these two large amounts together. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our original question, back a couple of pages. I'm going to find that. Here it is. So we're shopping and have £30. We want to buy items costing £4.22, £7.95, £8.53 and £13.47. What would be a quick way to work out if you've got enough money? So rounding would be a quick way to work out if we've got enough money. So let's see if we can just quickly round these. Let's just do it to the nearest pound. Okay, so first of all, £4.22 to the nearest pound is £4. Next one, £7.95 to the nearest pound. We've been practicing this. That would be £8. £8.53 to the nearest pound. So rounded to the nearest pound. So the 5, remember, is in the right-hand column. We can see it over here. The 5's in the right-hand column, so we round that up to £9. And our final amount is £13.47. So if we're rounding to the nearest pound, that's this digit here. The 4 is in this column, so we leave that as a 3, so that gives us £13. So altogether, we've got £4, £8, £9 and £13. So let's add them up, starting with the biggest. So we've got 13. 13 add 9. Probably the easiest way to add 9 is to add 10 and take one off. So that gives us 22. 22 add 8 is also a nice easy one. That makes 30 and 4. So our estimate for that shopping would be £34. So I think the answer has to be that we have not got enough money there. Because also let's notice that with this amount we rounded down, that amount rounded up, that one rounded up, and that one rounded down. So when we've been doing a mixture of rounding up and rounding down, that's when we get the best estimate anyway. So £34 would be our estimate. So the quick way to work it out has been done, and we reckon we don't have enough money. Okay, that's a sad way to end a lesson, isn't it? Anyway, and I will see you tomorrow. We're going to look at more wordy type questions then. Okay, see you later.